Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us here for the Ross Valley School District Virtual Town Hall meeting regarding the reopening of schools for the 2021 school year. And I'm glad to see, well, I guess I'm not seeing you, you're seeing me. But thank you all so very much for joining us today. And I'm Marcy Traham, Superintendent for the Ross Valley School District. Very proud and pleased to be the new superintendent here. And very thrilled that you joined us today and present in the room. So some of us are here at the district office, and so I'd like to welcome and introduce you to our Director of Curriculum and Instruction, Julia Wolcott. And then also in the room is our Directory of Technology is Sean Maher, and he is behind the scenes right now. You don't see him on camera at all, but he is here helping to be sure that we don't run into any technical difficulties, which hopefully we won't. And then also in the room today, we have Principal Donna Faulkner, and she is here because as you all are writing in your additional questions, then she is here so that she can take those questions and put them into the slide deck so that we can address those. And then also, as you might see, is we also have Annalisa Bauer, Trustee Annalisa Bauer. She's participating via Zoom and present in the room. Hello, Annalisa. Thank you for joining us. And then also in the room here with us, we have our board president, Ann Capron. And so those are the two board members who are participating in our community meeting today. No other board members are participating. And so want to again, thank you all for being here. As you may know from the emails that I sent out, what we've done in preparation for the town hall meeting today is that we've taken all the questions that you've submitted through our surveys, through our communications at rossvalleyschools.org. And we even did take a look at the public comments because some were applicable to the town hall meeting today. And so we've taken those and we've organized them into categories so that we could try to chunk and group them and address them that way. You won't see every single question here today, but every single question will be represented in the slideshow that we have, or the presentation deck for you. This isn't a presentation, it is just a response to questions that you've submitted. And this won't be our first town hall meeting either. So we're getting off to our start with our first one. Anything, Julia, that I may have forgotten?
I don't think so. Awesome, good to go.
All righty, wonderful. Okay. All righty, so on our first slide here, just as representative of two comments that we've received from parents. And as you see, they're pretty much two sides of a scale. So we have on one side of parent input that says that kids need to have live physical school for at least a few days per week, that the social isolation and mental health is now at a tipping point and is having adverse reactions that will be long felt. And then the other side of the scale is a parent who's very concerned about reopening too soon, given that it is not safe or may not be safe for our kids or for our teachers. And the numbers, the pandemic rate is worse than it was in March. And so how can we possibly open up in August if things are worse now than they were back in March? And so we know that also from the other input and feedback from parents is that we have other people on the same sides of the scale or somewhere in between. So it's really a balancing act of all of the input and feedback and concerns. And as you've heard me say numerous times, either in board meetings or through my emails, is that our first priority is this health and safety of all of our students and staff, as well as our families. And the county issued a press release on the 15th of July, which stated that schools, based on the increased rate in Marin County and the unavailability of testing and the inability to get testing results rapidly, is that schools should really consider not reopening to in-person instruction until the earliest of September 8th. And then we have Governor Newsom last Friday in his press conference letting us know that counties that are on the state's watch list may not reopen until they've been off for 14 consecutive days. So of course we are here monitoring our rates in Marin County. We're monitoring that. We know, based on everything we see in the news and everything we read, that one way to flatten this curve is to do our part, each and every one of us, by wearing face coverings, by social distancing, as well as doing what we can to not mix in or outside of our family units, or what some people call bubbling. And so we know that everybody is taking action to do that. And so we do hope that at some point we will return, to in-person school. And it just may take a little longer, but we will get there. So where we are today is we are planning for our schools to not reopen until at the earliest September 8th. And we'll be monitoring the data. And of course, our reopening will coincide with communication with our county health department to ensure that we're able to do so. So right now we're focusing on a virtual learning model for everybody.
All right. So we are looking at distance learning at the start of the year, and the name of our distance learning program is now the Virtual Learning Academy. And there's some substantive changes over what took place in the spring. We've learned a lot, and we're putting everything that we've learned to work. So I'm looking forward to answering these questions. First question is about what rigorous distance learning is, and that's the term that's being used by the state. And so to think about what makes learning rigorous, I think that all of the things that make classroom learning rigorous also make distance learning rigorous. And that talks about active learning, student engagement, problem solving, creativity, critical thinking, that student to student discourse. And so we are in the process of learning all of the different ways that we can make learning really feel authentic and engaging when it's in the cloud. With regards to synchronous or live instruction, the state guidelines mandate that we have daily live instruction. And so that will be happening. And then we also have mandated instructional minutes. For kindergarten, it's 180 minutes or 3 hours. For first and second grade, first through third grade, it's 230 minutes, just under 4 hours, and then 4th through 8th grade, 4 hours. The entire time segment of instructional minutes will likely not be live instruction. We have concerns about putting kids in front of a computer monitor for an entire day. And again, it's going to be developmentally based because we know that our youngest kids need different things from, say, our middle school kids. The school week will be 5 days, whether it's in the virtual learning model or the in-person model. And students will have one-on-one remote meetings with their teachers during office hours. So teachers will be holding office hours that will give them a chance to connect with individual students. We will continue to have our very strong and robust art, music, and PE programs in both remote instruction and in-person instruction. And younger students will not be using Google Classroom. Our TK through second grade students will be using a learning platform called Seesaw. A lot of districts in Marin and around the country really use this program, and it's just a little bit more kid-friendly for our young ones, for our littles, as we like to call them. I'm going to go pretty quickly through these questions because there are so many, so I'll just keep breezing along. In terms of assessment and grading, yes, our students will receive report card grades and report card marks this year. We have a parent here, I'm looking at number 2, about screen time. And yes, we are having conversations about how to limit screen time for our students and how to make use of outdoor learning environments once we are in person. Our principals are looking at outdoor learning environments at their sites. And also when kids are learning at home, you know, we want them to get outside over the course of the day. We don't want them seated at a table or a desk for the day. We want them moving. Project-based learning, same thing. So yes, we are looking at experiential learning for our students. Number 3, I think I've answered that. Yes, we are looking at outdoor environments, incorporating outdoor environments. I'm going to shoot down to number 5. So Children will interact directly with their teacher. Teachers will be holding different kinds of Zoom or virtual meetings. Some of those will be whole class, some of those will be small group, and some of those will be one-to-one direct instruction. Will sometimes be live. Live sessions of direct instruction will be recorded so that families can use them later on if the timing of the day doesn't work right for them. So I think that answers that one. In terms of building relationships, number 6, between teachers and students, that is something that we've been talking about a lot. As we all know, the beginning of the school year, teachers do so many different things to help build that relationship with their students. And I know that those efforts will be even stronger in a distance learning model. They recognize, our teachers recognize the importance of relationships. In fact, we spent the beginning of last year, the teachers were engaged in an in-service on culturally responsive teaching. And the focus of that in-service was on the importance of relationships. And that's where all of the studies are right now, are showing us that alongside rigor, you need relationships. So that is a concern of ours as well. Moving to the next slide. Options for teachers to get together. Yes, we do wish very much that we could get together face to face, but at this point we won't be able to do that at the start of the year, unfortunately. Looking forward to when we can meet face to face. A lot of questions came in about when are you going to know who your teacher is and who the classmates are, when are the cohorts going to be put together, when are classes going to come together, and that is of course something we're working on, and we don't have all the pieces of the puzzle on that one. We still have on a daily basis parents reaching out via the form that was sent out, I think a week ago, in terms of requesting distance learning for the year. And we know that there are a lot of parents that have outside circumstances through childcare situations, working with other families to kind of share the workload of the homeschooling, that have requests that they want to make. So our principals are working on the format that we'll be using to get some input from parents so that we can go ahead and move forward with creating classes and cohorts. So you'll have to be patient on that one. Teachers will have access to their classrooms and they will be able to teach from their classroom. So that will be happening this year. That's the answer to number 3. And assessment, yes. A few changes this year with assessment. We have some platforms that we're looking at. We also are going to have site-based distribution and turning in of materials. And so teachers may be giving paper assessments to be taken at home that are then turned in. And in some cases, we may be able to assess students on campus in small groups. We also are looking at the reading assessments that we use at the elementary school level and how teachers can do those via in a virtual format. Okay, school schedule. What will the start and end time be for elementary students? So we're going to follow the instructional minutes that are mandated by the state. Again, that's 180 minutes for kindergarten, 3 hours, and ranges up to 4 hours in the upper grades. So that day will start probably something like 8, 8:15, 8:30. We might be doing some staggering depending on the grade level. And we're looking at finishing up sometime around 1 o'clock. But please don't hold me to those times because we have a fabulous teaching and learning committee that is still working on our schedules. And we hope to get those out to you soon, which might take you to question 2. In fact, we have a meeting tomorrow. This team is composed of site administrators, myself, some district office administrators, and teachers from every campus in the district, as well as union representation. And we are working on schedules and recognizing the need to tailor schedules to grade levels so that our youngest kids' schedules look a little different from our upper elementary or certainly our middle school schedules. Question 3, jazz band will be happening, 0 period will be happening, clubs will be happening, whether it's live and in person or whether it is via the cloud in our virtual learning environment. Question 4, how will classes look for middle school students? Most likely the model will be that they are taking their classes based on their schedule. And so they'll have, we might use a block schedule so that one day you might have periods 1, 3, and 5 meet, and then the next day 2, 4, and actually would be period 7 meet because 6 is advisory. But the middle school distance learning schedule will be closely aligned with a regular in-person middle school schedule. I think we're going to answer buses. Marcia, do you want to take the buses question there?
Oh, sure. Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. So right now, as you all may know, is that we've historically had buses running for White Hills students and for Hidden Valley. The Marin Transportation Authority of Marin is working on the distancing, size, and that kind of thing to determine how many students can they actually transport. And so we do have a meeting coming up this next Monday in which we'll be reviewing what they have found. They're going to want to know what our schedule is at each of the Hidden Valley and, oh, sorry, let me take that back. I already do know that the transportation will only be provided for middle school students. So back in the spring, our middle school families did have the opportunity to respond to a survey put out by the Transportation Authority of Marin to let them know if they were interested in ridership. And so they've taken that information. They will be putting information out soon around that. So stay tuned for more information. I don't think it is that if you completed that survey, that if you weren't a resident of Ross Valley yet, that there might still be an opportunity if they do end up running bus service. So that's more to be seen on busing. And let me just back up too. The Safe Routes to School group is still meeting. They just had a meeting yesterday or the day before. So they're also still considering safe ingress and egress routes to and from school. Alrighty, so parent support. Will there be some form of after school or before school childcare in any of the two proposed models? If so, would cohorts be intermingled? That's a great question. So as you know, the Ross Valley School District does not operate before and after school care, but we do have the YMCA available on all of our elementary campuses. The YMCA is working right now. I just spoke to them just a couple of days ago related to their putting out information to the families. So stay tuned. As soon as we receive it, we will be letting all of you know what the options are. We are looking at also, if we're starting the school year, as we are in a distance learning model, there may be more opportunities for the YMCA to utilize our campuses. They are also looking at becoming community hubs for a place where children who need childcare and or support for completing their schoolwork will have places to do that. So they do have a different cohort model than schools do. And so they will be following whatever model they have. And then would cohorts be intermingled? That's a great question. Now, for what we're planning for the Ross Valley School District is we do need to ensure that we're maintaining single cohorts that students belong to in order to minimize the risk for illness. And so we will be doing that. But we know that every family has their daycare needs, things that they need for their children. So whether children participate on any on-campus childcare like the YMCA, or if the town of San Anselmo is still offering Robeson House for the children at Wade Thomas, or there might be other options that families have, whether they hire their own daycare providers to support their families. But there are options. There are still kids too who go to the Fairfax San Anselmo Children's Center. And so for daycare, and that's up through the end of 5th grade. So there are some options out there, but will the cohorts be intermingled? I imagine they would, because unfortunately we're responsible, and what we can manage are our schools, but we know that families have a variety of needs out there. How will the district support learning pods? The learning pods are those that probably we're all hearing about, learning about, or families looking to create groups for their kids to be able to provide daycare opportunities, sharing daycare responsibilities with each other. And how will the district support those? So our first and foremost, as I've said, responsibility is to provide and ensure that we're providing an equitable program for all of our students in the Ross Valley School District. We know that parents have a variety of needs. They're looking at a variety of options to have their children be in school, and they're getting really creative with it, and that's fantastic and fabulous. So how will the district support them? Just like we do with any other family needs within our district, we will be looking to serve every student in our district. So we'll have to stay tuned to learn more about what some of these pods are looking like, because the variety that I'm hearing of could be a family's just going to have them grouped for childcare. Others are going to have them grouped with a tutor. Others are going to have them grouped with a teacher. So one of the things that we just need to know and understand is related to this is, in order for students to access school in the Ross Valley School District, they need to remain enrolled in our schools. So being resident of San Anselmo or Fairfax, or on an already approved inter-district transfer request, and they need to remain a student of our schools. If a student does withdraw from our schools, they will no longer have access to any of our programs. They will be meaningfully engaged in another school environment. And when they do want to return, then they will just register again. What it could mean, because I've gotten this question from parents, is will they get to go to their resident school? That will all depend, as it is in any time when a child registers and is new to the district, is that if there's space, then they'll be able to attend. So if not, they're resident of the district, they will be provided school at a school, but it may not be at their district school. It would be one where there is space for them. How is the district planning on supporting the low-income families, essential workers, single parents? Will we arise from this pandemic with a vast academic inequality? We all know, we're reading, we're hearing about the concerns related to equity and for all families and students. And so for our students, any student who is enrolled and is attending Ross Valley schools, we have programs for whatever they might need. So we have our food program, and hopefully it will continue as it is right now, which the state allowed to be in place, is that for any child 18 and below, they can have food, and we're providing lunches. So you probably have seen information about that. We will be providing access to education for all of our students, looking at technology. We do have families who checked out Chromebooks last spring. We have other families who've indicated that they didn't need it last spring, but they do know that they won't be able to continue sharing devices, or they do need the devices in their homes. So we will be doing another checkout program for any student who needs it in their regardless of any income level of the family. And then for families who need support with online access, internet, we will be providing support for those families. Essential workers, single parents, we know that we have those in regular school times as well as during this pandemic. And so that's where we're working to create all of our schedules to provide some level of flexibility. So as Julia mentioned earlier, all of the online lessons, the video lessons, they'll be recorded so that a family can go back and review and watch those again with their child, or so that children can. We know that some parents may need to take their child to work with them, and so they may not be able to access at the exact time when that learning zone or learning time is set to be scheduled. So we're trying to plan and work with and provide as much flexibility there. And we are certainly doing our part with minimizing and not exacerbating any amount of academic, social, emotional, mental health inequality for any of our students and families in our district. So that's a priority of our work that we have ahead of us and planning for this next school year. Is there any way to give parents some goals for the fall? That's a great question. We know that families, if they can plan or know what's coming next for their children, then they are better able to support them. And so, yes, we are looking at being able to do that. We know in a typical, for example, back to school night, which may or may not be happening this year, but for sure, if they do, it'll be virtual, but not certainly in the same format that we've all enjoyed. But there will be opportunities for teachers to share what the kids are learning. Part of the requirement by the state is that there will be weekly engagement plans. And so with those, there would be the opportunity to share those with the parents as well. Is there a way to pair a homeschool program with a district curriculum to create a more flexible, engaging? Oh, sorry, Julia, can you go back? a homeschool program with district curriculum to create a more flexible, engaging project base? That's a great question. And I think once we have a better idea of what families are thinking, then we would be able to know at least how we can support or where that flexibility is needed for the kids to be engaged. What we know, and so I've mentioned the county guidelines, the state guidelines, what we also know, and what Julia talked about are minimal instructional minutes. What we also know is that required by the state, students, we must take attendance every day. We must seek out and meet with students and families if they're not accessing school to see what we need to do to support them. We know that we will be grading students, we will be assessing. We need to provide as close of an in-person learning environment as in a distance learning mode, if that's what we're in, or when for families who choose that. And so we are looking at making sure that our projects are engaging. There's learning opportunities to meet the different modalities of students. And so I guess stay tuned for more about that. We'll see. Just like in a regular classroom environment, we don't always know to start the school year exactly what's going to be going on in the classroom, but you can be assured that we will be as closely aligned to a regular classroom environment or through our virtual learning opportunity as well. What are structures that would be put in place so parents can connect with others nearby and in the same grade to help with virtual learning? Once we do know what the class assignments are, the grade levels, then as you may recall, just in other years where the classes were able to share the student information with their classmates, we'll be able to do that again. But right now, one of the requirements that we have by the state is that we cannot share family information, student contact information until we've given the parents the ability through what you may recall for families who have been with us in previous years, our back to school packet, the parent acknowledgement and release form. So we do need to give parents an opportunity to state whether or not they would like to participate in a directory. So it may take us a little time, but I think what you'll be seeing in our back to school activities is there's going to be a lot of time spent, as Julia mentioned, for the teachers to create their classroom environment. And that will include the opportunity for parents to be there as well. And by be there, I mean virtually. So that's going to be a lot of time spent. There are some teachers talking about connecting with and pairing up with the previous year's teacher so that they can provide that seamless interaction and support of each other as the kids progress. We know that for our TK and K students who had never been in school before, and for our fifth graders moving on to middle school, that this can be something where they don't know what they don't know. They haven't been in school before. They're not quite sure. If our early childhood students, special day class students who are just starting and they haven't participated with us before. So there will be a lot of time on the social emotional, the acclimation, the building a community inside the classroom. Those activities and those efforts will be made. We're on to students with special needs. All right, in this slide, a lot of the questions relate to students with who have special education services, but we do have other students who have needs. We have our English language learners, so giving them the English language instruction and support that they need. We have students who have 504s who have accommodations inside of their classroom. We have students who are receiving intervention support. So for all of our kids, with or without a specific IEP, an individualized education plan, which is part of being in special education, is that the IEP requirements for the students in special ed will be met. And so something a little bit different, getting into question number 2, is that this past spring, for those of you who had children with an IEP, is that the learning opportunities occurred one-on-one with the teacher or with the speech pathologist or with the occupational therapist. And we have now learned that we are able to provide small group instruction on the distance learning opportunities. So whatever the child needs as outlined in their IEP will be provided. How will the district plan to support these kids in order for online learning to be sufficient? I think I've addressed that. And OT, will it be available online? One of the things that we're looking at, and this is going to get me to a question that's coming up a little bit later, but I think I'll address it now. When we've gotten questions about, will the district apply for the waiver that is allowable by the state in order to resume elementary classes in person? At this time, the criteria or what the expectations are very unclear. There's no process as outlined by the state yet as to what that process would be related to filing for one of the waivers. So until those processes and the explanation and what we need to do to apply for the waiver, we're holding off on even considering it. And the reason is we need to spend our time getting ready for starting school in our virtual learning modality. And once those criteria or the process related to the waiver come out, then we'll certainly consider it. And I'll take a look at that because a lot of questions are there. So if you've looked at the language in it, it says in consultation with employees, with parents, and with community groups. We don't know what the definition of consultation is. And so there are a lot of questions still left to be determined around what the waiver is. But first and foremost, if we're able to provide in-person learning, it will be for our students who with the highest needs, and those will be our foci to start. Can you please give us some information on how the early intervention preschool? So that is the same for any students who are in our early childhood special day class. It will be the same. So there will be some distance and in person, and whatever level of in-person instruction we can provide once the school year starts, we will be looking into that and providing that, even if it doesn't mean that we're able to bring back our general population right away.
If I could just add that our Director of Student Services, Eric Sable, is not able to be with us this evening, but I know that he would be more than happy to answer any of these questions. And so feel free to shoot him an email.
Thank you. Alrighty, so cohorting. Can cohorts reflect out of school plans? As you probably are aware, for families who've been in our district before, there's a lot of factors that go into class placements. And first and foremost, the goal is to provide as much as possible balanced classes. And a lot of factors go into that. So we know that a lot of families, whether it's an out of school plan or whatever the family situation might be. So for example, we need to be sure that we have for siblings, we want to be sure that we, if we're having whether it's in the virtual learning or when we're able to return into school, and for families who don't choose to remain in a virtual learning for the remainder of the year, but who do choose the in-person option, we want to be sure that the families are having their kids at school at the same time if they have more than one child in their household. So there's a lot of considerations that go into class placements. We will do the best we can for any family that has special considerations or needs as to the class placements. So you will be seeing at some point coming out from the sites, just like they have in years past, kind of what we've called a parent input form, and we are planning to do that again. So stay tuned for that. Can learning pods be assigned to the same cohort in the virtual learning? The same would go with a virtual learning academy. That still is the process of balancing. So once we have an idea of our families who are interested, once our in-person, we are able to resume or begin in-person schooling for the families who continue on in a virtual learning academy through the school year, then we will have to take a look at that and see what we can do. So we'll have to stay tuned until we know who those families are. If there's a springtime miracle, not optimistic, and the learning environment of in-person is able to revert something that resembles normal, no masking or distancing, would there be flexibility for us to opt back in? Everything that we're doing is we are trying to be as flexible, adaptable, and accommodating as much as possible for families, because we know that as things progress, so from the time we did our very first survey and asked if families were interested in a distance learning option to the most recent check-in that we did around that, the numbers have shifted. So their families are also looking at what they need and what their desire is for their children for this next year. And so we're certainly looking to be as flexible and as adaptable as possible. One of the things that could happen, though, is once the in-person school classes are set, they may be at their cohort max. And so it may be that the child is perfectly able and we're ready to have them back, but it may not be at what has been their school of residence. We've had questions related to school of residence. So in the event that a family opts for a virtual learning for the school year, would they be able to go back to their school of residence in a physical school environment in the following year? We'll be tracking all of the students, their schools of residence, and that's what we'll be looking at to be able to accommodate that. We know that we certainly wouldn't want a child who has gone through a school from kindergarten through third grade to need to move schools when they resume to in-person schooling. So that is something that we're paying attention to. And then the next question for elementary and middle, it can answer the same way, is that the cohort sizes, what we're looking at is, as you know, the state has set a 6 feet distance between students as much as practicable. And what the county has said is that it can be 4 to 6 feet. And so what, as you know from all my emails and through the presentations at the board meetings, is that one of the things that we're working on is also working with our teachers union and our classified union to reach agreement for anything that is negotiable. And so part of this is the distancing is something that we're working with them on. So we'll be looking at that and then determining our cohort sizes. And also we have to factor in the size of our classrooms. And so one of the other items that we've seen a lot of emails come in around are taking advantage of outdoor learning spaces. And as Julia talked about, yes, each of the sites is looking out and maximizing all of the outdoor learning possibilities that they have. And so we'll be maximizing those. And then White Hill, as for families who have middle schoolers, as you may remember from the county guidelines for reopening schools, is that the cohort size can be larger. It can be up to 100 students, and there can be a mixing throughout the day, but that top level of a cohort size could be no more than 100 students. And so we are factoring in everything in our planning related to state and county guidelines and looking at also, as you probably have seen referenced in emails, AB 77 and SB 98, which are budget trailer bills, which give us further considerations as to how our schools need to look in this coming year.
I might just add to that in terms of cohort size, some of it has to do with the number of families that sign up for distance learning and for the full year. And so that makes changes as well.
Right, so pods. Can our public school program develop a fantastic online and pod style program? One in which we can depend on in case these types of pandemics happen often in our future. If we say that these will never end, then we can start designing something with hope and longevity. This is actually a perfect opportunity in the time of education to look at what we do and how we do it. And no matter what happens at the end of the day, we know that we're going to have some long-lasting changes to school and what school looks like and how we teach. And so taking advantage of this time to make changes and do better than we ever have. So this question, I think probably, if I'm understanding it right, is more of a long-term consideration as to how can we work together. I think that would be a great opportunity and one that we should definitely consider. Can consistency and collaboration be the cornerstone of how we operate? Absolutely. We know that in some of the feedback and input we've received is, well, let me just say it this way. For every bit of opportunity we have given you through surveys, we will continue to give you through our emails, through board public comment, through the communications at Ross Valley Schools emails. We are looking at gathering and always considering every bit of input. What we also know is once schools resume, then the school sites will also continue to have their parent club meetings, their site councils, and although they will operate remotely, there will be those opportunities. So absolutely, we will continue and we'll be able to flesh out and consider other opportunities, as I mentioned before, too, planning a superintendent's council, which we have representation from all of our schools, the Yes Foundation, as well as all of our parent and family constituent groups. So definitely we will. Is there functionality within the school system that will allow managing pods? As I've said before, first and foremost, what we need to do is provide our schools for our students. We will not take and be able to manage pods, but I think that goes along with supporting families in whatever they have. We will certainly do what we can to work with families, whether it's a pod or an individual need, but we won't be managing them. That will need to be, unfortunately, a family responsibility. How do we ensure all students that need a pod have access to one? That's a great question, and that is something that we struggle with in terms of making sure that what we provide our students is an equitable access to education. So we are hoping that as families are looking at developing the pods, they consider other students and not just those who have the financial access to that support and or the bandwidth to support or be, and how do you find out who those students are? That's a great question. And so we won't be able to share that information because we can't overtly identify any of our students in any way, but that would just be a consideration. So for us, we're focusing on providing a robust, accessible access for all of our students in our schools. And in-person scenarios, what's the earliest date students would return to in-person learning? The earliest date for in-person instruction, as we are looking at it right now, the earliest possible date would be September 8th. Now, what we know also by the press release by the county last week is that we can start to bring students in to get them acclimated into their classroom, to help them know what the procedures are, the protocols are for the in-person environment around hand washing, for example, distancing, wearing their face coverings, those kinds of things. So we will be looking at that, and also, again, taking into consideration the social emotional, the learning environment, the community that each class will be developing. We definitely will be looking at that, but it looks like September 8th will be the earliest. And we know that we're not just going to move and pivot. So when we can move into in-person learning, we will probably have a phase-in time for that, so that we can ensure that the protocols and procedures around ingress and egress, we're making sure that all the families know what those are, and we're making sure that we have all of our systems in place. By what date will parents have to decide on hybrid? That's a great question. It will be soon. And so this kind of takes us back to a previous question, which is if a family chooses distance, but then wishes to participate in the in-person hybrid model, will they be able to do that? We do need to know from families what you would like to do for this next school year. And we know also at the same time that a lot of families are saying, I don't really know until I know what it looks like. So we will be providing that information. We hope that through the slides that were presented at the board meeting the other night in terms of those sample schedules, that it helps to give a family a sense of what a distance learning and an in-person learning model will look like. We're planning those so that the model will be the same. We're hoping that they can be the same so that as a family is choosing the distance or the hybrid, that at least the day looks the same for those children who are participating in both models. When an in-person instruction resumes, how will students receive instruction? Alrighty, so that's a great question. So we're working on the staffing. We know that teachers can't be in two places at once, but we know that that's why we'll be taking advantage of recording any of the lessons that are taught. And then there will just be more coming out related to staffing and how that will look. So once we know what our models are, we know the how many students will be participating in each, then we'll be able to determine what is the staffing needed for each of those. Will teachers wear masks or shields or both? Will students wear masks? We know that, yes, every adult on a campus needs to wear a face covering. So every one of our employees on the campus will wear a face covering. It may be a mask, it may be a shield. We have found a shield that does not require that a mask be worn underneath. So if the employee wears the shield, they do not have to wear a mask. Will students wear masks? So that's where it could also be confusing for families, is that the governor on Friday said that students in grades 2 on down to age 2 are not required but strongly encouraged to wear masks. Students in grades 3 through 8 are required to wear masks, unless, of course, there's a contraindication, which I'm going to get to. So question number 5, for a student who has a medical or a behavioral or another reason that's contraindicated, that they are not able to wear a face covering, they will not be required to do so. But we also need to follow the county guidelines, which is that every student will need to, in any school grade level program in our school, will need to wear a face covering. So that county requirement is the stricter requirement, which is what we need to follow. So we will be following that. Now, if the guidelines change, then of course we'll be considering those, but that's what we know as of today. Illness. Need a drink of water. If a child gets a fever on a weeknight or during a school day, what will happen? Will their class close and tests be administered before return? Will it be classroom quarantine? So this handy chart that came out on Friday by the California Public Health Department is what we'll be using in coordination with the county. So in looking at this, if a student or staff has COVID-19 symptoms, they will be sent home from school. What we don't want is for any student or staff member to come to school if they aren't feeling well, because if when they come to school and we go through our day screening and they look like they have symptoms that look to be COVID type symptoms, they will be sent home. And if they're sent home, then they need to remain at home until they no longer exhibit, and they will be recommended for testing. We are still awaiting the county's protocols related to the testing requirements related to any COVID-19 testing. And so if a child is sent home, it's going to be recommended that there's testing, but the school and classroom can remain open. Then it goes on down in the chart. So I won't go through those here because you'll be seeing those as we develop our protocols. But yes, there are definitely protocols for when a student needs to stay home or staff member, when a classroom needs to be closed, when a school needs to be closed, or when a district needs to be closed. And all of that is in consultation with the county health department. So my child has asthma, and often coughs harmlessly for up to 4 weeks after flu because of this. Will he be permitted to be in class? Yes, so that's where we will work closely with the county health department through anything that the child has through his or her health care provider, because the other thing we don't want to do is to have any person who suffers from asthma or allergies or anything like that to have difficulty being in school. So we will definitely have plans in place for students and staff with those types of situations. Since the flu and COVID are indistinguishable without a test, so yes, so if a child or if a class, if a staff member needs to be at home, then while we're pending the results, then yes, the student will still have access to school. That will not change. And so what that will look like could be an individual basis. If the child is well enough, for example, to participate through a distance learning, if they're participating in the in-school learning, then of course they will receive that. They might need a home hospital. So there are a lot of options for, they might need independent study. So there are a lot of options related to how to ensure that a child does not have a learning loss. Now we know that when people are sick, they might be too sick to participate, and then they will when they, so just like any situation, a child will have makeup work to do and get caught up that way. How much school are they going to miss due to symptoms? That all depends. And that's one of the reasons why at this time, as Governor Newsom said, and his reason for having schools closed until they come off the state monitoring list, and what Dr. Willis has said also, is we want to do as much as we can to alleviate the opening and closing of classrooms and schools. And so with the daily monitoring that I'm doing of the county testing and rates, is we want to be sure that we have as much school going on as possible and reducing the opportunity for closure, because we know that as we'll be ready to pivot, and as we're starting off the school year in full distance model, is that we will be able to pivot and shift into between back and forth for the children who are at the in-person school. But we definitely want to minimize that. So we definitely want to have a handle on and know what's going on countywide to ensure that we don't have to start and stop.
All right. Question 1 about distance learning model. Will hybrid cohorts be defined at the start of the year? Again, we're going to need more information from families about what their needs are before we can make those. So as soon as we can, we will put our cohorts together and share those with families, but it probably will take some time. Question 2, are we likely back to an earlier proposal of a hybrid approach, split in-person and virtual schooling? Great question, and the answer to that is yes. So we originally had come up with a option for hybrid learning, hybrid meaning a combination of in-person and distance learning, that had 2 days a week in classroom, in person, and the rest of the time at home distance learning. And then AB 77 came out, and it took a while to interpret that law. Initially, the interpretation was that students had to be receiving in-person instruction on a daily basis, but it's looking now like that is something that we can consider as a hybrid model. And again, we're getting close to determining what learning is going to look like when we resume in-person instruction.
So but the hybrid could be an AB, like we were talking about at our June 16th board meeting, as well as an option for like an AM PM model.
Exactly. Yeah. 2 class streams currently planned. What might this look like in practice? How will you meet the 4-hour minimum daily instruction for both groups? Yes, this is really the tricky part here is we can't have a single teacher teaching 4 hours of in-person instruction and then 4 hours of distance learning. And so we're figuring out how to provide both simultaneously. We may have some teachers that are doing only distance learning, which makes that part easier for those students and those families. And again, we are looking at recording all of our instructional direct instruction and posting assignments so that some of it could be done at a family's own pace.
Okay, other questions. So we've already answered the one about outdoor learning spaces and when will Chromebooks be available to sign out. You'll be receiving information about that soon. We're not anticipating that any families would have to wait until the first day of school. We want to make sure that every child who needs a Chromebook has one before the first school day. So you'll be receiving information coming soon. Have we considered temporarily postponing all education? No, what we do know is that's not an option. We will continue to have school in some fashion, and that will be in our virtual learning academy to start for all students. Of course, if the guidelines require, then it may be longer than we know. AD can plan for it this time, but we'll be taking it. We'll just all continue to remain flexible as to how long that will be. But no, we'll be starting the year and we won't be postponing all education. We know that with concerns for children's learning loss, as well as helping them to continue on, we need to keep kids in school. And that's what our function is. So we will be doing that. can my child not do virtual learning and just start school when it reopens? How I interpret that question is that the child not participate in anything and only wait. So if we don't reopen school until January, for example, or if it's October, it doesn't matter, that they would just start. No, a student by compulsory education needs to be in school. And so they do have to participate in a school. I think I answered earlier that if a child withdraws from our district, what the process is around that. Can we create COVID fundraising campaign? That's a great one. We love that. Yes, absolutely. I think that we definitely need to put our heads together along with YES, because one of the things that we do want to be sure doesn't happen is that YES is unable to raise the funds that helped us to pay for our art and music and other programs that your YES dollars fund for the district. So we definitely want to have a plan for that. Will the district be requesting a waiver for on-site? I covered that. This one specifically came in around special ed students. And so I talked about that earlier. And so, yes, we're waiting to see what the requirements are around the waiver, and we'll be considering that.
Do we have any
Alrighty,
additional
so-
questions?
We did get some new questions on slide 17.
They're not showing
They're
up.
not showing up?
Yeah. Oh, no, nope, they're not showing up. Donna, do you want to go ahead and
try hitting escape to exit full screen, F5 to do a refresh?
And also, while Julia's doing that, just want to let you all know that depending on how many additional questions, we're able to stay on longer. And the good news is for any of you who are going to be needing to leave us right at 6, this is being recorded. And so it will be posted, and then we'll also let you know where we left off and started at what minute after 6 o'clock, so that if you don't want to rewatch the whole thing, you'll have a sense of where to begin in the recorded version.
It's going to take a moment. I'm going to just pop down to the bottom here and then present. I'm just going to back it up to the, okay, there we go.
17.
Um,
Let's take a second to take a look at these.
mhm. You know, that first question about the pods, and this has come in. We've gotten some concerned emails from families who wish they were in a pod. They're new to the school or they're new to the district and they don't know anyone. There was actually one from an essential worker who said that because I'm a nurse, people don't feel safe having me in their pod. And so that concern is shared by us of really wanting the pods to be equitable. And I think you probably, many of you are reading in the paper, some worries that because people are getting really creative in solving the problem of how do we homeschool our kids, some kids may be left behind. So it is our job in the Ross Valley School District to make sure that kids aren't left behind. We encourage all of you to think about who's in your pod and who might not be in a pod, and reach out and support one another. And I know that our principals are going to be working on that as well. And we are really committed to knowing what the learning experience is for every one of our children as we begin the year. And our teachers will be connecting with families, and all of our support staff will be connecting with families, and principals will be connecting with families and finding out who needs more support and how can we help provide that support. For certain, we need to prioritize those students and those families that are more vulnerable, and students who are maybe experiencing more learning loss, and figure out what we can do to support them. All the kids in a grade level doing 100% distance learning option have the same teachers?
That's a great question. It'll all depend on how many students at a grade level are interested. What we're most likely envisioning, just based on the way that the survey responses have come in thus far, is that students will be in cross-district groups for distance learning. That might very well be how that turns out for the children who are continuing in the 100% distance learning option for the same year, or sorry, through the school year. And so we will need to see. But what we do know is I'm looking at this as an opportunity too, that all of our kids end up at White Hill. So the more kids, and if we look at ourselves as being a community and supporting each and every child, not just at our school, I know there's school pride and all that, let's get some district pride. And let's to make sure that we're looking at this as a district-wide problem that we're facing right now, and we're going to look at it as a district-wide solution. So we're looking forward to embracing and saying that all of the kids in the Ross Valley School District are all of our kids and not just related to a school. So I think this provides us a great opportunity for children to get to know each other across schools. And I think there's plenty of opportunity here amongst all these lemons. When will students receive? We covered that. So that might be more likely for White Hill, because typically an elementary family won't refer to it as a schedule. And so just as soon as we have them ready, they will receive them. It may not look like it has in the past, where because as you may know from seeing the school calendar, that there have been orientation activities for students coming onto the White Hill campus and returning students for 7th and 8th graders. And so those will look different. And so just as soon as everything is ready, they will be provided. So stay tuned, White Hillians, for more information from Mr. Catanzari to Ms. Lubomirsky. Will there be an option for students? Yes, I think we covered that in a previous
yeah, so students who are participating in an in-person learning that need to move to 100% distance learning will be able to do that.
Oh, so that was yeah, okay, vice versa. Give us a sense of the hours of the actual school day for the first 3 to 4 weeks of school. This is a White Hill question, so we can plan accordingly with supplemental childcare and other logistics for working parents.
So in terms of the distance learning hours for the first portion of the year, I would say starting somewhere around 8 or 8:30 and going until somewhere around 1 or 2. But we need to take a look. We are very close to having schedules. Again, I think I mentioned that we have a meeting tomorrow to finalize schedules, but somewhere in that ballpark is probably, that's in the ballpark. What will in-person live teacher interaction provided daily look like? This sounds like this is a White Hill question as well. And yes, live sessions with all teachers every day, very likely on a block schedule. So a student might have 3 classes over the course of one day, and they would have live sessions with all 3 of those classroom teachers.
And those would be recorded as well, right? So that in the event.
Direct instruction will be recorded. We won't necessarily be recording an entire classroom period. Are you planning for 8th graders using IXL math curriculum? Not IXL, but actually we have it's looking like we're going to be using a new curriculum, actually brand new, called Imagine Learning with our middle school students. It's fantastic. It's adaptable. And it actually has, as students are working on problems, it's got a help feature. And once they've asked for help a couple of times and gotten their digital help and it hasn't helped enough, they actually can contact a live tutor right in that moment, which is pretty cool for distance learning. So I'm very excited about that and hoping to be able to roll that out soon. School will be 5 days a week. Yes, in distance and in person, school will be 5 days a week. How can I safely set up small group tutoring sessions? Tutoring sessions could be set up through Zoom if you don't want to worry about mixing cohorts. I think that would work well. And our teachers have reported that when they have worked with small groups via Zoom or in some cases Google Meet, that's been really successful. I kind of think of it as if everybody can fit on your screen in the kind of Brady Bunch mode, you're good to go. It's when you can't see everybody at once that we start to lose that feeling of group work and community feeling. I think we've answered.
We have talked about the calendar for the year. And so in order to, this question is around maximizing outdoor learning environments, so maybe extending the school year into summer months. So we are talking about that with employees, about the possibility of that. As you may remember from the approved calendar for the 2021 school year. We did build in an extra 3 days back when we approved that calendar. That was for the potentiality of a school shutdown due to like a power shutoff type of a thing or whatever might come our way. But it can certainly be in place. We may also, as we get into the school year, need to readjust the calendar. And there may be a need to shorten winter break or midwinter break or spring break. There may need to be something like that. But of course, we would have plenty of notice and opportunity for that. Because we also know that people need a break, and with whatever school's going to look like, it may not be the best way to do it. So we'll gauge what that's going to look like. Maximizing outdoor learning, absolutely. We did talk about that earlier in terms of every school is looking at the total number of spaces. What we know is that a class wouldn't be able to be outside all day long, but they could certainly have opportunities for being outside and engaging. The gardens, for example, at each of the schools, there are plenty of opportunities for different kinds of learning than just the reading, writing, math, and that kind of thing. We do know that there will be lots of opportunities.
School in-person learning, the September 8th is the correct date. I don't know where the September 14th came from. It sounds like it was said perhaps by mistake at a board meeting, but September 8th is the first day that we can possibly begin in-person instruction. Oh.
Yes, on a call that I was on earlier this week, the county guidelines at this time are not looking to change. And so what we know is that and that's one of the reasons I'm monitoring everything that's going on, is because we have to look at what works locally for our schools and our district. And it may be that we won't be having that mixing. So we're looking to see what we can do. And that's one of the reasons why we do need to know sooner than later which families want to have the virtual learning academy that extends through the entire school year. Because the one thing we do know is that the more students who are participating in the virtual learning academy will reduce the in-person class sizes or cohort sizes. And so having that information will be super helpful as we go forward in planning.
And just also to add that White Hill now has, I think at last count, 13 different schedules that we've been working on, and many of those schedules actually don't have our students mixing cohorts with such a large number.
Are there any others, Donna?
There are two more.
Oh, that means I have to.
If there are two more, would it be? Oh, well, she's working on that. You could say it out loud, Donna. And
Okay, the question is, given remote learning, if students are in the full distance program, could there be less of a focus on having live sessions with all teachers every day? Having 3 Zoom classes a day is not really the best practice and does not necessarily encourage the best learning for middle school students.
The White Hill staff, in coordination with Principal Catanzarite and Assistant Principal Lubarsky, are working on the schedules and looking at what they know to be great opportunities for the kids. And so just to go back, we do have to have daily live interaction, a minimum of instructional minutes, as Julia's outlined earlier. And White Hill's working on that is, of course, considering all the developmental needs of middle schoolers. So I think they're factoring all of that in. This may be a question by a staff member. I'm not sure. So if this is a question by a staff member as opposed to a parent, please, staff member, reach out to Matt and connect with him to make sure he knows your concerns. He, of course, will know your concerns either way, because we'll be talking to him about what happened on today's town hall meeting, if he's not watching already.
What day will school start? Will distance learning begin on August 19th? That is the plan. School starts on August 19th. What will lunch look like for middle schoolers at White Hill if in-person / hybrid is chosen? We are hoping to create a schedule without a lunch.
For all of our grades.
For all of our grades, yes.
Students will have access to receiving lunch, a grab and go style, but we won't have a lunch period per se on the campus.
And time for a substantial snack and time for breaks, but for the reasons that seem to be embedded in this question, not a full lunch. Students with IEPs, how will compulsory minutes that were lost be addressed in the new year? They will be addressed by the student's
Service provider.
And absolutely, we're aware of that.
And that is, as Julia mentioned earlier, our new Director of Student Services, Eric Sable. He is working right now on plans, and so those will be forthcoming.
I know you already answered question 1, but the piece that I would add to it is we are looking to find ways for teaching to be flexible, and so that families that want to structure their day differently can. But yes, we do need to provide daily live instruction in accordance with state guidelines.
Any more, Donna?
There are.
Did you answer all 3 of this?
Oh.
What was your last question? I'm sorry, I was checking an email. It was about the IEPs.
Yes.
Yes, we've got 2 more on slide 21.
21,
4
okay.
questions and another one.
Okay. So question 2 on this slide. Do you want to take that one, Marcy?
Let me read it. If a student starts distance and then needs to move into classroom, they will not be guaranteed to return to their home school, and they may not be able to return to their current school next year. No. So if what we're looking at doing is ensuring that families do get to remain at their school of residence. So we will work to ensure that students who, if they have to be assigned to a different school for the 2021 school year, they will be able to be back at their school for the 21-22. Now that may not be the case for our incoming kindergartners, for example. And the reason that is some of our schools may right now be over enrolled. So for 2021, we can accommodate them, but when they move into first grade, so that's where the date and time stamp, as all new registering families know, or those of you who have been with us remember from when you registered, is that we do look at the date and time stamp. So, but for children who have been in schools, we will not displace the student who has been attending a school prior to the 2021 school year in the 21-22 school year. Now, if we're still in this pandemic mode and that kind of thing that extends, then we'll be looking at something different. But no, we want children to attend their home schools. And maybe by this whole situation, we will have one district school located on different campuses as opposed to individual schools. Who knows what will come out of this? There's the lemonade.
What do teachers advise for younger kids? We don't have any teachers in the room right now, former teachers who are having difficulty engaging or wanting to show up for Zoom learning. And I don't think that's limited to first grade students and second grade students. Zooming can be hard. It's hard for adults who are sitting in Zoom meetings. And so we all need to work on how to just focus on best practices for virtual learning. We know that we need short segments of time and different kinds of activities that engage our kids, and teachers can advise you directly. So if your kiddo is having a hard time focusing, you can reach out to your child's teacher and they will have some really good advice for you, I am sure.
Any more, Donna?
I think I gotta
Yes,
refresh
there's one more on
again.
that. There's how many students have already opted out of in-person learning?
Do you know offhand, Julia?
I want to say something like 6. So in the form that we sent out, there were 2 options. One was I am ready to request distance learning, and the other is I am likely to request distance learning. And there were more I am likelies than there were I am readies. And I think of the I am readies, it was in the 60s somewhere, but don't quote me on that.
I can double check.
And that may change as we ask parents to commit to an option. It may definitely change.
You may want to refresh. There's 3 more questions on slide 22.
Okay, it is 15. Let's take these last three. And of course, anything that comes in later, we'll be holding more of these town halls. And so we can address them there.
Marcy, you want to take the first two?
I need you to put it in presentation mode because the eyesight over here, I can't read that.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you. Are we definitely going to return to campus if Marin is off the watch list for 14 days and or September 8th arrives? Are there any other obstacles? There could be other obstacles that arise. We're not anticipating any. So we're looking to work through that. And we're hoping that we'll be back in school as soon as possible. Will sufficient hand washing opportunities be incorporated? Yes, absolutely. Hand washing, we know, is kind of the cornerstone of what needs to be provided for any where there isn't hand washing opportunities, then using hand sanitizer. There will be hand sanitizer in every classroom, at the entrances to classrooms as students enter. We know that we'll be using hand sanitizer, for example, when kids go to the restroom and they come back in, just to ensure that they do have clean hands, even if they did wash them in the restroom, since nobody would be there to observe them, hand sanitizer. So there'll be a lot of hand washing opportunities at elementary and middle. They'll be built in as part of the day.
And in terms of instructional minutes, as we all know, within the school day, teachers don't spend the entire day talking to kids. There's lots of time that takes place during a classroom when students are talking to each other, or they're reading a book, or they're writing, or what have you. So all of that qualifies as instructional minutes, and that is why a 4-hour instructional day doesn't necessarily mean 4 hours of live teaching. It may be that a teacher gives a 10-minute instructional introduction to how to say, write an opinion piece. And then the students know what their assignment is. They're given some time offline to work on that. And then the teacher brings students back to talk about it. Or the teacher might be working with small groups over the course of the day. So it's everything all added up together, including assignments that students are doing on their own.
Okay.
I think we did it.
All right, we did it. All of that in an hour and 15. Woohoo! All right, great job, everybody. Thank you all so much for joining us today. And I also want to acknowledge that, as you can see, and as so many emails I've received from families is acknowledging the hard work that we're doing. We know this is not easy on any of you as well. You're not just managing your child's school, which you always used to be able to send them off, but you're also managing your work life, your day-to-day household responsibilities. So we know that this situation is not just tough on schools, it is tough for every single one of our families and for all of our staff as well. And so we just want to acknowledge that and say how sorry we are, and just really wish that we weren't in this situation, but we are. And I think working together, always presuming positive intent and maintaining trust and collaboration and working together, we all will get through this. And as I said in one of my emails a while ago, we will, because it's the Ross Valley way, and I know we can do it. So thank you all so very much for joining us today. Be well, stay well, and practice with your children wearing their face coverings and airplane arms for social distancing. They can do that. It's great. So we will get through this, and I just want to thank you all. Any last comments by anyone?
No, thank you, Marcy.
Thank you. Look forward to seeing you all again. Well, I guess I'm not seeing you.